The top focus on this broadcast are on the developments taking place at the G7 summit from the global as well as the Indian perspective. Now, Prime Minister Narendra Modi has already held key bilateral meetings, but today the spotlight is on the meeting between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Donald Trump. They haven't actually met in the last 16 months, and a lot has happened that has only added to tense moments and strained relationship between both the countries. Let me in fact go across to our managing editor, Zaka Jacob, joining us live from Avian, where all the action is. Zaka, body language experts have already analyzed that first short meeting between both the leaders, saying that there were no hugs. Yes, there were handshakes, but the warmth was missing. And like I said, a lot has transpired in the last 16 months, from tariff to the increase in H-1B visa fees to the latest, the killing of Indian sailors, the issue that the Prime Minister actually raised even before this meeting.
Well, I'm not a body language expert, but yeah, people have been suggesting that yesterday the handshake was more formal. There wasn't a hug like the last few times they have met. But if you were to look at the substantive terms, you're right. There are differences that have crept up in the relationship. Both leaders, I guess, realize it and need to address these differences. The most proximate, of course, is the seafarers issue, the sailors issue. In fact, yesterday, the Prime Minister's speech, he mentioned specifically, without, of course, referring to the specific incident in which the 3 Indian sailors were killed, but he did mention that there should be safety of seafarers in international waterways. And this was mentioned in the presence of Donald Trump because he was there in the room. It was in the outreach summit that happened in the afternoon yesterday. So today, when he meets President Trump directly one-on-one, he will likely raise this issue and convey to the American side, to the leadership of the United States, that India does not expect friendly countries like the US to be shooting at its sailors. And these are not combatants, these are not military folks, these are civilians, these are seafarers. There were surely non-lethal ways in which they could have been dealt with. And more importantly, I think the response of the US State Department after the killing was rather contrite. There was no expression of any remorse or regret or even an apology. I spoke to Ian Bremmer yesterday, and he said an apology should come forthwith. I mean, he feels that either Trump should or somebody from the US Defense Department should forthwith apologize to the Indian side, because this is just not on. Having said that, there are other issues as well in the relationship which have been niggling. The trade issue, for example, India still does not have that interim trade agreement with the United States. Negotiations are still going on. Jameson Greer, who is the U.S. Trade representative, is going to be in India next week. And again, there is no clarity on, what is the tariff for India? Is it 18%? Is it 10%? Now there is the additional threat of the Section 301 tariffs as well. So that issue needs to be resolved as well. But I think fundamentally, and this morning you saw the announcement from Pete Hegseth, the U.S. Defense Secretary, that they are renaming the U.S. Indo-Pacific Command, which used to be the Pacific Command, or PACOM. They're going back to the old name of the Pacific Command. The Indo-Pacific was specifically inserted when Trump was president in his first term in 2018 because of the importance of the Indo-Pacific, because of the Quad, now reverting back to the old nomenclature, even though it's semantics. But the fact is that it shows that Indo-Pacific may not be that much of a priority for the United States as it was all these years. So all of these issues are concerns, and this will be brought up when Prime Minister Modi meets with President Trump. It's expected to happen about 2:30 local time. That's about 4 hours from now, and we'll be getting that to you live here on Times Now.
Absolutely, Zaka. Before I let you go, one quick question, one last question with you. The biggest question that everybody is asking, is this going to help reset ties between both the nations? Yes, these leaders have at one point shared a great rapport, great equation. And then, like you said, the sequence of events that you described led to tense moments between both the countries. Now, end of the day, it's diplomacy. Even if you are highlighting these issues, it cannot be confrontational. That's something that everyone understands. However, of course, domestic politics playing out completely differently here in India, accusing the government of not taking a hard stand.
Yeah, I mean, domestic politics will always be there. I mean, yes, the opposition did criticize, the MEA's initial response to the killing of the sailors. Then Dr. Jaishankar spoke to Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, and he, in his tweet, said that India had lodged a strong protest. But then subsequently, the State Department put out a statement which was, like I said, rather contrite. It did not express any remorse or regret. But this is one incident, however bad it is in the context of the relationship. This is one incident. I think the relationship is much broader than that, and both countries have a vested interest in saving the relationship and bringing it back on track. Right now, I think the sense is, at least in some areas, when it comes to trade, when it comes to the Russian oil issue, when it comes to technology, etc., everyone's talking about the AI wave. On some of these issues, it seems like the relationship has gone a bit off track. And if it needs to be brought back on track, then the leaders have to signal that push. And I suspect that's what they will attempt to do today when they meet in Evian, to try and reset the relationship, because both sides understand the importance of this relationship. It's a strategic partnership that's lasted over 25 years. And if the common concern for both the United States and for India is how to manage the rise of China, then that common concern should bind both Washington and Delhi, and that should override whatever these niggling and pressing issues are. But the impetus and the push for it to try and ride over or smoothen over these niggling worries and niggling issues, the impetus has to come from the two leaders. It cannot be done by the diplomats or the bureaucrats.
Absolutely. This is the first face-to-face meeting between both leaders in about 16 months. And you just mentioned your conversation with the global political analyst, Mr. Ian Bremmer. Let's play that out, in which he highlights how U.S. needs to apologize.
Prime Minister Modi and President Trump meeting in the afternoon here in Evian. It's the first time both men will be meeting since February of 2025. A lot has transpired on the trade issue, the tariffs issue, the Russian oil issue. But the most pressing and the most immediate one is the shooting and killing of 3 Indian sailors by American Navy fire. How do you think these issues will be brought up in this meeting?
Well, there should be an apology. Obviously, my understanding is this was in Omani territorial waters. There's really no excuse for that, and I understand that neither the United States nor India wants a big fight over this. But, much the same as when India and Canada had a very significant flap over a Canadian citizen that Canada said had been killed by the Indians. They expected an apology. They wanted to make sure it didn't happen again. I expect India expects an apology here. They want to make sure it doesn't happen again. These were Indian citizens that were minding their own business, and they were killed by the United States in a mistake. Obviously, they weren't intentionally targeted by the Americans, but nonetheless, it's a problem. I do think that both leaders want this relationship to maintain a level of stability. I think India has been disappointed that a lot of the leaning into the Quad and leaning into the U.S. relationship strategically, militarily, technologically has not panned out as well as they would have liked, certainly not given the tariffs that came after Liberation Day. And I think India is hedging to a greater degree as a consequence. So I think the meeting will go well, but I'd be surprised if the headlines reflect a breakthrough of any sort.
Absolutely. So you heard the global political analyst saying that first up, U.S. needs to apologize. Now, as far as the relationship between both the countries is concerned, one more issue has come to fore, which needs attention. It is raising a lot of serious questions on the intention of U.S. Where does Donald Trump, where does United States of America really want to take this relationship? And why is the intent here being questioned? The intent is being questioned after Trump administration decided to change the name of its Pacific Command to from Indo-Pacific Command. The context is crucial here. In 2018, the Trump administration changed the name U.S. Pacific Command to U.S. Indo-Pacific Command, and it was then seen as a sign of growing importance of India to the Pentagon, of growing significance between both the nations. But now the fact that they have renamed U.S. Indo-Pacific Command to U.S. Pacific Command has raised serious questions on the relationship itself, on the intent of Donald Trump's administration. So on one hand, these decisions are being taken, and on the other, at the G7 summit, there will be a face-to-face meeting, a bilateral between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Donald Trump. Ahead of that, the Prime Minister emphasized the importance of ensuring the security of seafarers. He also spoke about how Indian civilians have lost their lives amidst the escalating West Asia conflict. And this has happened right before this meeting between both the leaders. Remember, the Indian seafarers were killed in an attack during the escalating West Asia conflict. That issue has been highlighted by Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Let's see if that comes up during the discussion as well. We'll keep a track on all the developments taking place. Now, what's interesting, one other interesting development that has transpired at the G7 summit is a light-hearted exchange that was witnessed between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Melanie. Yes, they are back and they crossed paths during the G7 summit. That's when, during a casual conversation, Melanie was heard saying that, yes, we are a famous couple on social media, on Instagram, and that moment has gone viral again. Just like the melody moment that happened, this moment has gone viral as well.
Happy to see you again. Yeah, we are the most famous couple. Happy to see you again. Yeah, we are the most famous couple.
It's a grooming gang scandal. That's what for years Britain has been calling it. But now there is a 219-page report that talks about the ordeal of the victims, that talks about those who were involved. And interestingly, there's the angle of religion that has also been discussed in this 219-page report. The incident that till now was called the grooming gang scandal. Organized networks of, and this is what the report mentions, I'm quoting from the report, organized networks of Muslim men who systematically raped, trafficked, drugged, impregnated and destroyed lives of thousands upon thousands of British children across every region of the United Kingdom for decades. The findings in this independent inquiry report led by British MP Rupert Lowe has reignited one of the most explosive and painful debates in UK. It examines decades of organized child sexual exploitation and also alleges that rape gangs operated across at least 149 local authority areas, while the institutions meant to protect children repeatedly failed to act. The report's allegations are staggering. It claims more than 250,000 young girls may have been subjected to grooming, trafficking, repeated rape, violence, forced abortions and other forms of abuse over several decades. And the British MP who led the independent investigation says, and I quote, "Our inquiry report proves that without doubt there is an undeniable link between religion and the rape gangs. As a country, we need to find the courage to finally say so." Here's what he told the British Parliament recently.
Firstly, I would like to thank the 260,974 British men and women who signed the petition to make this debate possible. And I want to welcome these brave survivors who are sitting behind us in the hall. This debate is about them. As you quite rightly say, it's not about politics. I want the world to hear what we heard during the 2 weeks of our independent rape gang inquiry hearings. An inquiry that should never have needed to happen. I sincerely urge this Parliament to listen to the testimonies from these brave survivors and to act, to finally act. So the first testimony: he took his pants down, penetrated me, had sex with me. He then stopped before ejaculation. He picked up the bottle of Jack Daniels, which was now empty, and he forced it up inside me. He broke the glass while he was there. At that point, I was about 12, nearly 13.
Let's go across to our national editor, Pranesh, joining us on the broadcast. The British MP says, let's call a spade a spade. It's not a local, isolated unrelated incident. And he also says there is the religious angle. Let's have the courage to highlight that. Let's have the courage to speak about it.
You know, Swati, this has been in the talks for a long time now. For the first time, the full report is out by this independent MP. And this report just tells us about the extent of this scandal. This is, if you look at the number, 250,000 survivors. It tells you just the sheer number, scale, duration of this scandal is much bigger than the Epstein files. Srinjoy Chaudhary is also joining us, and Sagarika has the victim testimonies with her. But I just want to say 2-3 quick points. The first and the most important is why did it come to this? The fundamental reason is political correctness. So in the name of what people call multiculturalism, a rot is allowed to fester, and this is a direct result of that rot. No one is against diversity. But you see, diversity can't happen without integration, and that is the problem. Look at the people who are at the heart of this scandal, the perpetrators, mostly Pakistani Muslim men. And more than 90% of the people who've been identified as perpetrators are Pakistani Muslim men. There have been many global commentators who've been in denial about the origin of or the lineage, so to say, of the perpetrators. But this report lays bare the facts. If you were to just skim through the report, it'll leave you disturbed. I could not go beyond the first 15-20 pages in the first attempt. Sagarika painstakingly took out some testimonies, which we will go to her and we will see. But the second most important point that I want to highlight for our viewers is that this is also about political correctness. So you see, there has been a massive institutional failures, whether it is the Social Council, the NHS, the UK police, what have you, all the social institutions in that lineup from top to bottom. All of them failed because they wanted to be politically correct. So even if they knew that, here is a taxi driver or a takeaway vendor who's done this to this girl, they would keep quiet in the interest of diversity, multiculturalism, and that is the problem. So accountability must be fixed, not just, perpetrators should be identified and jailed and punished, but also institutional failure must be addressed. Your quick point from Srinjoy on this. Srinjoy.
Yeah, the point is, you're right about all of that, but there is one other overwhelmingly important point, and that is basically it's a matter of votes. There are a large number of constituencies in central and northern England where the Pakistani vote is particularly important. So all these people who fight for those Pakistani votes in central England, in northern England, in particular constituencies where these votes will get you a majority, they have stayed silent.
That's right.
The question is why? Only because you want to win an election, that you let your young people, your young girls, your young women in all of England victims of this grooming gang.
Right. Srinjoy, you're right. Swati, that is really the most important point, that the vote became a license for the violators.
Absolutely. The greed to win elections led the entire system to fail these young, innocent girls. And there are thousands and thousands of them. I believe Sagarika is joining us from the newspaper as well with more details on what transpired and these heartbreaking testimonies that have come to fore, Saga.
The testimonies, Swati, are numbing, blood-curdling. Anybody who will go through these testimonies one after the other. It's a 219-page report led by, it's an independent inquiry by British MP Rupert Lowe. But one thing that the report says, and I want to put the focus on what it concludes. First, it was called grooming gangs, but this report goes on to say they are rape gangs, and they operated across more than 100 localities. This exploitation went on for years and years. And the report says, and I'm going to quote verbatim, organized networks of Muslim men systematically raped, trafficked, drugged, impregnated and destroyed lives of thousands upon thousands of British children across every region of the United Kingdom for decades. The report then says the scale reaches at least, think about it, 250,000 victims. 250,000. Can you believe it, Swati? This is not a collection of isolated local scandals. It is a national scandal of industrial scale child rape and modern day slavery enabled, protected and prolonged by the deliberate failures of the British state. And what did they find out? They found out that there was a relentless pattern that repeated rape, gang rape, blackmail with filmed abuse, pregnancies used as weapons of control, miscarriages, caused abortions, and the birth of children who entered the world already condemned to the same cycle. And these are the testimonies. One survivor said, I was raped by 700 different men over 3 years. Swati, this report is explosive and the focus is back on the debate. Call it out for what it is.
Absolutely. You're absolutely right, Sagarika. Those are heartbreaking testimonies coming in from the victims. So, yes, it's shocking that this crime continued to take place. But what's even more shocking is that the administration, the authorities, the police, the investigators, all of them just wanted to brush this aside. They wanted to, just call it a grooming gang scandal. Now, let's see what changes in Britain after those testimonies were read in Parliament. Let's see how the investigators act. Let's see if they're able to break the cycle. Thank you very much to Prinish, Enjoy and Sagarika for getting us the details. Quick break with that. We have a lot more lined up on the other side.